What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Great show today. We got John Garcia on. We're going to talk recruiting. Is one of Wisconsin's prize commits going to get away in this class? A little bit more on Cole LaCrue and a sleeper safety prospect. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I am your host, Ryan Herrings. As always, very appreciative of everybody tuning in. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at Upside. Download the free Upside app. Use the promo code LOCKED ON, or use the promo code LOCKED, to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. And we are joined by John Garcia Jr., always insightful John Garcia Jr., Sports Illustrated recruiting director, Locked On's college football recruiting insider. John, as always, it is great to have you.
Likewise, Ryan. Great to be here.
Let's talk about last we were on the show, we talked about a couple potential decommits. We talked about Tretch being a potential decommit, and we talked about Roderick Pierce. Tretch is gone. Roderick Pierce seems, and he's the one that we talked about as maybe the bigger guy that they need to keep, right? The more important target they need to keep, the more important for the program anyway. Where is Roderick Pierce now? Because it seems like that continues to kind of unravel from Wisconsin's standpoint.
Yeah, we thought he was sort of the most likely to open things up just based on a lot of schools getting involved in very short order. And that has really only continued since we last spoke about Pierce. You know, he has since visited Michigan and wants to take an official visit up that way. Texas has recently offered, and now he wants to take a visit out to Texas before all is said and done. So once you get to this stage of it, Ryan, it feels like a lot more than due diligence. This isn't just, hey, I want to, see the country and see these big games and maybe, have some backup plans if it doesn't work out with Wisconsin. It feels more like a reset, more like things are wide open in his overall recruiting process. So he's saving the spot at Wisconsin in case nothing lives up to it. But he's already taken one visit elsewhere, and at least two more are on the way. So just playing the odds here, it feels like he's least likely to stick with that Badger commitment, but he's still a pledge as we record today. So never say never.
How often does a scenario like this happen where a player is committed to a school that I would say isn't a blue blood? Wisconsin's not one of the powerhouse recruiting schools. That player starts taking visits. We mentioned Michigan. I know Texas. Auburn has offered. I don't know if you'll get down there, but when those players start visiting the power schools, how often do they tend to just kind of remain with the original school they committed to?
It depends on so many things, right? What does that Texas board look like? They've got like 23 verbal commitments. They got a pass rusher yesterday that they flipped from Oklahoma, who's more of a fit there. They got a big D-line class already on board. So how much space does Texas have? Michigan, a little bit of a lighter class, understandably more room from that standpoint. Ditto with Auburn, although they're going through a coaching change as well. So I think a lot of it has to do with the schools. Who is involved and what kind of offer is it? Is this something that is a galvanizing point for that coaching staff? Like it feels like at Michigan where you offered, you got them on campus once, and now let's do it again. That feels pretty darn tangible from the Michigan perspective, and he's a Midwestern kid, so naturally that's something that would probably appeal a little bit more, but it's rare to answer your question, your initial question. It's rare to end up sticking with that school, even when things are good and I guess stable there. Wisconsin, we think it's stable. We think it's Leonard. We think we've kind of got it all figured out. It just hasn't been announced just yet. And look, this kid is in favor of Jim Leonard. I think that's a big point in this thing. Maybe the sooner that is announced, the sooner he can start to stabilize if this is just very thorough due diligence. But more times than not, especially when there's a coaching transition and other visits and offers are coming in, it's really hard to hold on to that recruit.
Yeah, I that's just kind of vibes with what the general feeling I had. Like it seems like the more this kind of blossoms out, the less likely it is he remains at Wisconsin, almost regardless of what happens to Leonard. Right. I wanted to ask a question. This is actually from our Discord. We have a Discord for the Locked On Badgers channel. John, you should join in on that, by the way. ZB75 sent this question out, a really good one. What about Ashton Sanders pivoting back to, some of the Badgers targeted? And is there anyone else on the defense line the Badgers are maybe targeting to preemptively make up for Pierce?
Yeah, look, the Badgers were in it heavy for Sanders out of California in the summer months. They got that official visit under their belt, and it looked like it was Wisconsin was in the thick of it before he committed to Cal. He has since decommitted, so the door is open for everyone in this Ashton Sanders recruitment. Oklahoma just came in with an offer, maybe a reciprocation of losing one of their defensive linemen, and he'd like to take a trip out to Norman. But he's also talking to folks. He talked to my boy Greg Biggins out west for 24/7. He also talked about returning to Wisconsin for an official visit. And you might be like, wait, he already took one. How do you do it? When there's a coaching change, you are allowed to take multiple official visits to the same school, provided you took one under the previous administration. And I know for a lot of your audience, you're like, this is kind of the same coaching staff. It's not really different. It just has to be different at the top. It just has to be a different head coach. So Sanders would be allotted the opportunity to take another official visit to Wisconsin. It looks like he's totally moved on from Cal at this point, and it's going to come down to some of the newer schools involved and the one school that's been in it the whole time with Wisconsin. So depending on how the staff is structured underneath Leonard, assuming he's the guy, how much change happens on the defensive side of the ball, the defensive staff, Sanders could be a really nice candidate and a potential replacement if and when another decommitment goes down.
Talk about for those that, because we haven't talked to Ashton Sanders in a while. It kind of got put in the rearview mirror when he committed to Cal. We've moved on from a fan's perspective. Talk to me again, just really quickly. His game, is he in the same type of tier as Pierce? Did you kind of have them similarly on your board?
They are similar. I think Sanders is a little bit more polished, a little bit more put together in terms of what he's going to be. True inside out interior guy, 6'3", 300 pounds, carries it well, plays with good leverage, but can give you some pass rushing upside and athleticism on top of it, as opposed to Pierce, who's a little bit more raw, has some of those same athletic traits, but he's just not quite as polished. So it could be kind of a floor versus ceiling deal between the two players. I think Pierce maybe long-term has a little bit more upside, but on the front end, I think Ashton Sanders is more ready to come in and contribute day one at one of the Power 5 schools that's looking at him.
And talk to me, is there any other names you've heard in terms of the Badgers going out looking for another defensive lineman to maybe come into this class, especially if Pierce does decommit?
Yeah, another inside-out type, interestingly enough, Ted Gregory, a guy who was offered just a couple weeks ago, despite a long-standing commitment to Vanderbilt, kid out of New Jersey. So, he's not a kid who grew up in SEC country, and it's a lock if any SEC school comes through. This is a Jersey kid, technically Big Ten country, right? He was more of a regional recruit before Vanderbilt got involved. Rutgers had him for an official visit in the offseason, and that was kind of it. So there's an opportunity, should that communication further between Wisconsin and Ted Gregory, to get him on campus. And again, physically a really intriguing player, extremely long player, 6'6", 275. So a guy who is maybe a ways away from physically being complete and ready-made for the Big Ten. But in terms of the frame and the upside, that could be a really intriguing prospect just from a frame standpoint. One of the most recent offers that Wisconsin has sent out. I think when we talk about new offers going out under transition, on offense, it's kind of status quo. But when they come out on defense, it feels different, right? Because that's kind of the side of the ball you feel like under Leonard is going to stay relatively similar to what we've seen already with Wisconsin in 2022. So I think that's interesting that they picked up an offer out that way, despite him being committed to Vanderbilt. You don't take a swing like that if you don't feel like you got a shot.
Oh, for sure. That's really interesting stuff. Do you have a feel on other schools maybe getting involved with Gregory, or is it just Wisconsin right now looking to flip him?
I think that's the most recent school to jump in. Hadn't heard a whole lot of other schools involved at this point for the New Jersey native. So that's something to keep an eye on, because typically, where one school's circling back on a kid, another school might say, oh, this is a pretty good idea. Let's take a look ourselves, especially when you've only taken one official visit. I think he could have a busy November and December before signing day.
Yeah, for sure. That's great stuff. Really good information as always. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about underrated safety from the Midwest the Badgers have started talking to, see what John thinks of his game. That's coming up next in Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends at Upside. Upside offsets inflated prices by giving you cash back on purchases. Inflation has us all thinking about different ways to cut back. We eat out less because eating out gets expensive now. I went to McDonald's literally today. By the way, my McDonald's guy knows my first name in the drive-through window. He called me one of his regulars, which is a terrible amount of life choices on my part. But McDonald's is like $15 now if I get what I'm getting. So inflation has hit all of us. Upside is here to help. Upside gives you cash back when you use it on just everyday regular things, eating out, groceries, gas, all of it. You get free cash back and you don't have to do anything different to use it. It's just an app that you use. It's something I use. I use it to help buy some of the swag behind me. All the Wisconsin helmets. I used Upside app to kind of buy some of that and help kind of fit out my room a little bit better. Upside continues just to help us all in this time of inflation when we're all looking for ways just to get a little bit more back. So download the free Upside app. It's something I use, like I said. Use it to get swag for yourself. Use the promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. I want to thank everybody again for making Locked On Badgers your first listen every single day. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Sports Today. All the biggest news stories, only the way Locked On Sports Network can deliver them to you. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to bring John Garcia Jr. back on, Sports Illustrated recruiting director, Locked On's college football recruiting insider. John, I wanted to pick your brain on Johnny Schmitt, who's kind of an underrated, 6'1" safety out of Ohio. What have you seen about his game? He started talking to Wisconsin, picked up a preferred walk-on offer. Also, Kansas and Illinois jumped in with PWO offers. Where are you at on his game?
First of all, his name, Johnny Schmitt. I mean, that's got NIL written all over it.
Yes,
so
it does.
Congratulations to his wallet if his career blossoms in college. Yeah, he's picking up late traction, right? He plays at St. Rita there in Chicago, that Catholic league there. That's some of the best football, to my knowledge, in the state of Illinois. And as you mentioned, Illinois has jumped in here, Kansas and Wisconsin as well. So 3 teams at 3 different positions of priority in the 2022 season, have had all different seasons all together. But an interesting player, a big physical safety type, 6'1", 190 right now. So he's already built to play in an aggressive type defense, and his game fits right along with that. He can play deep, but he just seems most comfortable when he's able to come downhill, be an extra underneath defender, support the run, rush the passer even. He's a disruptive force there in the back end. But the coverage skills aren't to be overlooked here either. He's got good instincts and range relative to his size, and he can make plays on the football. A couple interceptions as a senior, 10 pass breakups in his all-county senior season. So a guy who's able to impact both phases of the game from his safety spot. One you could probably envision as maybe a nickel type, an overhang defender, a rover, a hybrid in the modern defensive schematics because of all these crazy spread offenses that everybody's trying to figure out how to stop. So you can hit, you can cover, you're aggressive, and you're physically, in those right height, weight, frame marks and measurables. You've got an opportunity to make a pretty big impact, and a bunch of schools are starting to see that here in short order.
Yeah, I find it interesting. You and I have talked about walk-ons quite a bit, right? We talked about Luna Larson, Cam Fain last year, some of the Wisconsin program and the history of their walk-ons. I always kind of ask you when we talk about a guy who's walking on, does he look like a walk-on to you on film?
He doesn't. I like this kid. I understand, hey, if you can, from a business standpoint, if you can get him on your roster as a walk-on, you take it, right? That's one less scholarship. That's one more additional body you can bring in at another spot. Not sure what, Johnny's, home life situation is or financial situation. But if you can get him at a walk-on bargain, if you will, I totally understand it. But yeah, this kid looks like he can come downhill and play. I'm surprised that he doesn't have a little bit more attention, although it's coming just in the last week. It feels like all the attention is coming his way. So playing patient, maybe even allowing his recruitment to drift into next year, early next year, before the February signing day, maybe something like that would be advantageous to him. And a spot opens up, a school misses on a recruit they think that they're going to grab, and that letter of intent comes in, and you could sign a conventional scholarship. But no, I don't think he looks like a walk-on. I think he's a kid who can, again, bring you some of what you need to do in this day and age, right? All the new fancy positions that start to really disrupt the defense are mobile quarterbacks, running backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield, dynamic slot receivers, and tight ends. If you have great safety play, you can impact all four of those offensive positions. And Schmitt has, again, the mentality and the balance in his own game to contribute against some of those groups, including tight ends. And I think that's the one. If you can cover a tight end, whether it's because you're overly physical or you have a combination of physicality and quickness like he does, I think you have just an extra layer of value, because that's the one position that everybody wants. Everybody wants to find a Darren Waller, a Travis Kelce, a guy who's just a jumbo receiver, a Kyle Pitts, right? A guy who should be a receiver, but he's just too darn big, so you made him a tight end. Everybody's trying to find that. So anybody to combat those kind of players has added value, and I think Schmitt can do it.
The other thing that's interesting to me, and I think this is something you and I have talked about before as well, looking at different coaching staffs and who they're offering in their track record, right? You look at Wisconsin's track record, Jim Leonard as a safety, their track record with walk-ons. You look at Lance Leipold coming in, his track record for finding underranked talent, underdeveloped talent, and really becoming, a winner with that. And then Bielema, he traces that back to the Wisconsin walk-on era as well and what he did there. That's three pretty good coaching staffs at finding underranked talent and really doing something with them.
That's a great point. All three of them have been there, done that in different ways, particularly at their previous stops. So yeah, it just creates a little bit more benefit of the doubt from other schools potentially looking at a kid like this. That's why I think, again, from his perspective, not that I'm his agent or anything, I would say, hey, secure a spot with one of these schools, but also see if that recruitment can drift a little bit, and if a true scholarship offer could come in. He's a Chicago kid. Like, where's the MAC? Are some of these other programs in this conversation? Because it's a little bit surprising that we don't see more of those offers coming in now that he's getting PWOs from Power 5 and reputable defensive schools.
Yeah, that's a great point there. Definitely going to be interesting to follow his recruitment, see where that goes. We might end up talking about him again as this journey continues on through the cycle.
Sure.
Coming up next, I want to finish up here on Cole LaCrue. He committed to Wisconsin. We've talked about him a bunch. But coming up next, I kind of want to talk to John Garcia about his ceiling and what a quarterback does to solidify a class. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our good friends at BetOnline. BetOnline just remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and information. And they have you covered on every type of sport: football, basketball, baseball, hockey, eSports, UFC, everything you want to bet on. You can do it at BetOnline, plus live Vegas casino games, blackjack, roulette. It is awesome. Do it responsibly, but it's a great way to do live in-game betting. It's a great place to go and do some futures betting. NBA is going on now. If you have a great feel, baseball, you can already start taking bets on where free agents are going to land for future stuff. NFL, obviously, everything is there. College football, college basketball, a great spot to put some future bets on. If you think Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten, looked good in game one. They can shoot the ball this year. So BetOnline is a source to do all of that. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. I want to thank everybody again tuning in to Locked On Badgers, making this one of your first listens every single day. I truly, truly do appreciate it. We're going to bring John Garcia Jr. back on. John, as always, we're very appreciative of your time. Where can people find your very insightful work?
Right here on Locked On, of course, on Twitter at John Garcia_JR, and on the website, si.com/college.
I love it, man. And Cole LaCrue, it happened. We got our quarterback. We talked about him a ton. I want to take a couple different angles, a couple things I don't think we've really talked about. The first is, this has been a staff we've talked about in transition, obviously, with Leonard taking over for Paul Chryst. They've lost a couple decommits. What is getting a quarterback into this class do to maybe stabilize that a little bit?
It stabilizes it. That's really the word to me. If there's worry and there's questions, like there always is around these transitions and what the current commits are thinking collectively, when there's no quarterback, it can, you got to find that guy, right? Who's going to lead the group chat? Who's going to get everybody, to jump on a Zoom, or probably more likely a group FaceTime, at 7 p.m. before dinner or whatever it is. Now that you've got the quarterback, you don't worry about those things as much. I guarantee you, through the Wisconsin communication, through the offer, through the visits, through all those points, there was a lot of talk about this group of commits, and there's more defense than offense, as you would expect to this point. So I think getting him on board will help stabilize not only the defensive recruits that you think are more likely to stick around, but also help to maybe galvanize some on the offensive side of the ball. We know, they lost the receiver. Could they, go after some more pass catching talent here in December or January? Now all of a sudden Cole LaCrue can be a part of that conversation as a quarterback, as a guy who's been around and done it and had his own late rise as a recruit, right? Chip on your shoulder kind of guy. That's the one you want leading the group chat, right? You want your Jalen Hurts type leading the group chat as opposed to the guy who was heralded from the moment he ever picked up a football. So I think all of that is advantageous for Wisconsin, but on the front end and optically especially, it stabilizes the pitch that Wisconsin is making because they still are racking up verbal commitments despite all of this transition to come.
Yeah, and you've talked to LaCrue before. I've talked to him. He's a charismatic, confident dude,
Oh, yeah.
right? Sometimes it becomes a little hyperbole that your quarterback's always your leader. He's always but LaCrue really does embody a lot of that.
He does. He reminds me, coming out talking to Matt Corral, who was at Ole Miss and, now he's in the NFL, was a pretty high pick last year. Just a kid who's not the biggest, not the fastest, not the biggest arm, but collectively the attitude he plays with and the athleticism that he plays with at that position is something that will galvanize others, whether it's from his confidence, from that chip on his shoulder mentality, or his actual play, right? 3rd and 7, you're about to be sacked, you get out of it, you're falling out of bounds, you shovel it over to a tight end that's streaking out of bounds. That's the play that changes the game, right? I mean, he's got that type of ability and that type of creativity as a player that you just don't see from a lot of quarterbacks. And I think it's one of those things that you have to have, right? Watch Mahomes, watch Josh Allen, watch Lamar Jackson, watch all these quarterbacks that are doing it at the highest level. First of all, none of those guys were extremely heralded coming out, but they all have this creativity to where you're just like, what? Like that was a dead to right sack. The defensive end wasn't blocked, and he's got 15 sacks this year, yet it's a 40-yard completion or a run or whatever it is. So that's what I think LaCrue brings. He's got enough foundational traits to really steady the ship, but he's got these extra traits and attributes that can lead to some boom or bust, high risk, high reward type stuff. That is probably, again, it should be welcomed in the Badger community because there hasn't been a whole lot of high risk, high reward, at least from where I sit and looking at Wisconsin, especially offensively.
I think it's a good point. And I think this dovetails a little bit into the final question I want to ask you. You touched on it a little bit, but let's say everything kind of hits, everything comes together, everything clicks, which also means you're surrounded by the right type of people and the right coaching staff, obviously. But what is Cole LaCrue's upside, his absolute ceiling, in your opinion?
I think he's the guy that, can be the difference between bowl eligibility and a shot at getting to Indianapolis. It could be that wide ranging to me. I think, again, going back to that high risk, high reward mentality, it could result in 6-6 when things aren't great, right? But when things click for a guy like that, it could really push you to have one of those bubble up years we talk about with Wisconsin all the time, where all of a sudden it's 10 wins. And I think that type of presence can potentially attract a different type of complementary player. And that's really, those two things in conjunction are really the things that you need at Wisconsin, right? You feel good about O-line recruiting always. The backfield's going to be stacked pretty much always. What does the quarterback and the pass catcher group look like? That's the unknown. That's where the improvements have to come. And typically they rise and fall together. So I do think that something like that can be a galvanizing force, and he's a playmaker. So there's going to be some risk involved and maybe some turnovers. Although, again, I don't want to paint him as a gunslinger because I think that's the type that's going to throw, 5 touchdowns and maybe 5 picks in the same kind of game. He is not that. He is much more careful and calculated than a gunslinger would otherwise be presented. But the skill set, the athleticism, the creativity, the grit, and the confidence could sometimes get you in some of that trouble. But on the flip side, again, it could also create the big type, chunk plays that we just haven't seen from the Wisconsin passing game or from the quarterback position in quite some time.
Now, Badger fans are excited for it, man. And that was very, very well put. As always, John Garcia brings all the insight, great just knowledge to the show. Always welcome. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Locked On Badgers, making this your first show every day. We're going to continue talking to you tomorrow. We actually got an interview with Cole LaCrue coming up, so we're going to get that on as well. Excited for that. With that, we got basketball coming up too. Tons of content. As always, when you're done here, go check out Locked On Sports Today. All the biggest news stories, everything going on in the day wrapped up in one show. Only Locked On can deliver that to you. Wherever it finds your podcast, on YouTube, on the Odyssey app. With that said, John, as always, we really appreciate your time on Wisconsin, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow.